And we're live.
All right. Good evening and welcome to the regular council meeting for Monday, November the 23rd, 2020. This evening's meeting is being held electronically in accordance with the relevant sections of the Municipal Act. Members of the public may view live proceedings as well as the recorded transcript after the meeting by visiting the town's YouTube page. So with that, before we get going, I would ask that everybody stand for the playing of the national anthem. I apologize if there was some feedback there. I forgot to mute my microphone before I stood up, so hopefully it didn't interfere too much. In any event, we'd also like to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Chippewa, and the people of the Three Fires Confederacy. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest from any member of council for this evening's agenda? See any? So with that, can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the November 9th meeting? Moved by Councillor Buffett, seconded by Councillor Hull. Is there any discussion on those minutes? All in favor? That's carried. Excellent. Jennifer, were there any questions for question period tonight?
There were no questions submitted for this evening, Your Worship.
And just a reminder for members of the public, if you do have questions, those can be submitted to the clerk up to 12 noon on the day of our regular council meetings. So with that, we will move right into presentations. We're joined by Kim Delahunt, who is the CEO of Headwaters Healthcare Center. And I believe Kim has some guests with her as well. So I'll turn the floor over to Kim and you can proceed with your presentation. So welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Mary Mills and Council, for having me here today. And I am joined with several other people that I'd like to acknowledge. So our board chair, Lori Kerr, is on, and our board director, Ken Topping. I hadn't seen him earlier. Let me just see. I don't think he's on yet, but he could be joining. As well as Tom Reed, our chief of our paramedics, is on. And I'm also joined by Jen Hamilton, Director of Communications and Stakeholder Relations. So thank you for having me. As I think you all know, I started my role at Headwaters just over a year ago. And what a year it has been. But I'm pleased tonight. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to pull up a presentation and I'm going to share some great acknowledgements and accomplishments that we've had. So just confirming that you guys can all see that. I'm going to put it on full screen here and project it. There we go.
Yep. Good.
All right. Perfect. So, you know, it has been quite a year. However, I'm going to go back one. I'm amazed each and every day at the accomplishments that occur at the hospital and across our team, even in the midst of a pandemic. Tonight, we will have the opportunity to hear about some of our accomplishments and also what we're planning and what we're focused on now and for the months to come. And I do just want to touch on our strategic plan, which is on the screen there, which was developed just over a year ago with the input from many, many citizens across Dufferin-Caledon. And I think you would agree that over the past number of months, we've certainly been living our purpose of one community caring together, and it has never been more appropriate. On this slide, you'll see that we have our three strategic directions down the left-hand side, and I think those still hold true, as well as our values down the right-hand side. And we live our values, and I see them being lived each and every day across the hospital and in the community, and they're still very relevant. As well, we continue to focus on making every dollar count at the hospital and what we spend it on, and also supporting our teams and our staff and physicians with as much innovation, research, and technology advancements that we can. It would be impossible to come to you tonight without touching on our COVID-19 experience over the last number of months. Certainly, it has tested our resolve, as is shown on the slide. There are many, many great examples of how, even though it turned our world upside down, our team was very resilient and acted very, very quickly. The hospital, along with our paramedic partners, working with our community partners, including our elected officials and municipal and county staff, we managed to right the ship very effectively early on. We set up our COVID-19 assessment center in less than a week. You can see some photos there. And we also, had to pivot really quickly recently within a weekend where it was announced provincially that we needed to have a booking system. And we did that really quickly with the support of Dufferin County. And in fact, the county came to the rescue and they offered up their call center in Shelburne to our team, which was amazing. And it was with this kindness and collaboration that we were able to stand up the booking call center. And since then, we have moved it into our hospital. Really quickly, we also created a ramping up strategy when it was safe. And we, worked hard to ensure that we could safely bring patients back into the hospital when it was possible. We also had to rapidly source personal protective equipment, or PPE. And we did that. And there was lots of passion shown for ensuring our staff and patients had the necessary PPE equipment. We also had to redeploy staff across the hospital to work in many different areas to help out. And that showed and took courage and kindness. And then, of course, we unfortunately experienced the loss of our volunteers during the pandemic due to the restrictions and keeping everyone safe. However, many stepped up to help out across the hospital. We reworked many protocols and procedures, such as medication dispensing, to ensure safety of patients and staff throughout the last number of months. And teamwork really enabled this agile adaptation to new ways of doing things. We did have to do some rapid deployment to staff our exterior COVID-19 assessment center early on. And subsequently, we've also had to call on many staff to staff it when we moved it inside the hospital. And that included also lots of people coming together to bring the staff on, equipment, and development of procedures. And all 4 of our values have shone through this work. And finally, we did have a serious outbreak in a long-term care home, as many of you will recall. And that certainly demonstrated how we live all of our values each and every day when all staff come to work. I want to share some numbers with you. So this is coming out of our annual report from last year, and there are just a few that I want to highlight. Last year we had over 41,000 emergency department visits at Headwaters. We had nearly 25,000 outpatient visits. There were over 2,500 oncology consultations and close to 1,500 chemotherapy treatments. We had nearly 796,000 lab tests completed at Headwaters and close to 30,000 diagnostic imaging tests. We had 5,900 admissions to our units. And, to complete all of this great work at Headwaters, we have over 760 staff, about 150 physicians, dentists, and midwives, over 400 volunteers, and we did welcome 39 medical students last year. There are a number of improvements and service updates that we did last year, and here are some of the highlights which show how we really are getting even better and following our strategic direction at the hospital. We continue to redevelop our patient and family engagement strategy, where patients, families, and caregivers share their lived experiences with us and help us to find new ways of improving our services. And we are always forever grateful for their time and expertise and their perspectives. They have served on our hiring panels. They sit on a number of hospital committees. They've been on the editorial committee for our last annual report, and they continue to provide feedback on our plans, such as our reopening plans when the hospital was ramping back up. We also have 2 new board of director positions called patient and family caregiver directors, which were introduced this year on our board. And that is to bring the patient lens to all of the work that we do. And in fact, Ken Topping, who I'm not sure if he's joined us yet, but he is one of our patient and family caregiver directors on the board. Winifred Anderson is our other patient and family caregiver director. And unfortunately, she was not able to join us tonight. Last year, we also introduced a new wireless fetal monitor and many new machines in our lab. We also launched several new online tools to increase access to health records, and we are partnering with 3 other hospitals to replace our internal health information system. This is a massive upgrade that we're undertaking, and it will provide a seamless integration of information between hospitals and clinicians, and it will really provide advanced functionality for accessing patient records and other health information. We also achieved the level 1 Choosing Wise designation last year for our efforts in reducing unnecessary tests and treatments. And we are participating in a 1-year hospital mortality risk project, or known as HOMR for short, and that uses information pulled from our health information system to help identify patients who may benefit from a palliative approach to care, pardon me. We also renewed our urology program to treat diseases and disorders of the urinary system in men and women. And, in response to feedback that we continually receive about the hospital, we're always looking at what upgrades we can do to the facility, and also new pieces of equipment that we need to purchase. There are some other upgrades that we completed or are in the process of completing. So as you know, I think many of you are aware that we did replace the previous old circular staircase that was in the main lobby of the hospital. So there's a new, safer staircase now that is up to code. And as well, we expanded our patient waiting areas. We have an updated central registration area, as well as a modernized cafe and gift shop, which unfortunately we're not able to have open right now, but we do look forward to when that space can be fully utilized. And all of this work is through the generosity of members of the community through our hospital foundation and our hospital auxiliary. The newly completed main lobby area is called the Joan and Paul Waiter Welcome Center, and it is named in honor of generous local donors. We're very grateful to Joan and Paul Waiter and the hospital auxiliary, whose contributions made that renovation possible. As well, you'll see in the middle right there, we did do some renovations to our pediatric areas, which were transitioned into comforting spaces with technological upgrades and beautiful murals painted on the walls. And lastly, we're completing some final renovations on the outside portion of our main entrance, which should be done in the next month or 2. Within our 3rd strategic direction of providing integrated care close to home, I'm going to focus a lot on our Ontario Health Team work. And, obviously we know that we cannot do the work that we need to do across Dufferin-Caledon alone, but we do it with many, many of our partners in care. In early December last year, our MPP Sylvie Jones announced that the Hills of Headwaters Collaborative was one of the province's first 24 Ontario Health Teams. And that announcement brought together close to 40 partners, including primary care physicians and specialists, our municipalities and the county. We have working groups working in the areas of palliative care, virtual or digital care, mental health and addictions, and primary care, among others. And they're continuing to do great work. We're actually coming on our 1st-year anniversary of our Ontario Health Team being announced. The pandemic has certainly emboldened our teams to work even harder together to find even more opportunities to collaborate to ensure that all people, including vulnerable populations in congregate settings, are well taken care of, especially during the pandemic. And a prime example of this was the development of a regional approach for personal protective equipment. So Dufferin County stepped in to provide space to store some PPE. The hospital is sourcing the PPE, leveraging some existing contracts and some good pricing that we have, really ensuring that all partners across Dufferin-Caledon that need PPE are able to access it. There are many local heroes that we have across Dufferin-Caledon, and I'm going to pause just to highlight a few. We've got a hero named Carla on the top left there, who was on our surgical nursing team, and she helped a couple deliver their newborn baby Molly outside of our hospital entrance last year. And then we've got local heroes, kind of the top middle and top right. Local physicians, Dr. Michael Gagnon and Dr. Charlie Joyce, who were this year's Dr. David Scott Award recipients, and both physicians have made and continue to make countless contributions to our communities. On the bottom there, bottom right, familiar to you, we've got heroes like Mayor Mills and Deputy Mayor Anderson, who are among the recipients of the Chairperson's Award this year that were also announced at our annual general meeting. And this recognition is for tremendous support and leadership shown in addressing the challenges when Shelburne Residence was experiencing a COVID-19 outbreak this year. And your leadership continues to this day, so thank you. And on the bottom left there, we have a hero like Trey Nevin, who is on our nursing staff. And Trey, along with her daughters and husband, all contracted COVID-19. She told their story in a video that we have taped and shared as a cautionary tale, but also as a story of hope and courage. And then in the middle there, each and every day we have heroes across our hospital, across Headwaters. And their selflessness and dedication really ensures that people are cared for where and when they need it. On this slide here, around the financials and our situation, certainly the pandemic has put a strain on our financial resources. In fact, we were looking to have a small surplus at the end of the last fiscal year. However, with the onset of the pandemic in March, we ended up finishing the fiscal year with a small deficit of $717,000, which is unfortunate. Year over year, our revenues have increased 7.2% or by $5.2 million from the prior year. However, our expenses have increased by $5.9 million or 8.2%. And largely the higher increase in expenses is really due to annual inflationary costs, some increased drug costs, and there's always one-time adjustments that occur. So we do continue to have some funding pressures at Headwaters that we're always revisiting and planning for. In terms of looking forward now, so certainly as you can appreciate, our plans from March onwards were very altered and continue to be altered due to the pandemic. However, the team at the hospital is back on track and we are daily continually reprioritizing given new changes, shifts in numbers, shifts in what is happening. We have ramped up our surgeries. The hospital is back, it's full. All the clinics are operating again. We have welcomed essential visitors back into the hospital. However, some of these things may need to be revisited over the next coming weeks and months. We do know that our future right now is different. It looks different, but what we know will not change is our commitment to caring for the people across our communities. The COVID-19 pandemic has certainly put a strain, on our financial resources. I think on our staff, it's been a long number of months. However, we're always grateful for the support of our foundation and our auxiliary, and their work too has been made more challenging due to the pandemic, and we're forever grateful. We do plan on completing our accreditation next year and completing it with flying colors. Our hospital grounds outside continually is enhanced, which is great because it does bring great joy to everyone inside the hospital. And then I certainly want to extend my heartfelt thanks to everyone who has made donations to the hospital and who continues to support us, as it does go a long way to ensuring we're always looking at improving our patient experience and technology. I think you know how to get in touch with us, but we're always here, always ready to answer any questions that you may have and provide any and all support. And if there are any messages ever that we can help you with, we're happy to contribute, but please reach out at any time. And just to finish off, I do just want to pause again to say just how inspired I am by everyone who works at the hospital for their dedication, their selflessness, for really living our values each and every day, especially right now through the pandemic. We certainly feel that we are continuing to live our purpose there of one community caring together each and every day. And without our partners, like our EMS partners and Tom and his team and our community partners, we would not be as successful as we are. And I'm happy to answer any questions now, Mayor Mills. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. And just on a personal level, I just want to thank you and your team at Headwaters and Tom and his team with Dufferin Paramedics for your tremendous medical leadership through this pandemic. And specifically, of course, the collaboration that you guys sort of spearheaded when it came to the issues we were facing at Shelburne Residence. I think it certainly goes without saying that situation, as bad as it was, certainly could have been much worse had it not have been for for the quick and decisive involvement that you and Dufferin paramedics took. So thank you very much on behalf of the community for that. Are there any questions for Kim or any other member of her team that's on here? Ken Topping is on, by the way. He texted me. He's stuck in the lobby. So he's not appearing on the screen, but he is here. So, any questions for Kim? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much again. And with that, I'll just ask for a motion to accept the presentation. Moved by Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Fegan. All in favor? It's carried. Thanks, guys. Keep up the great work.
Thank you. Have a lovely evening.
You too. Take care.
Thank you.
All right. So on to council inquiries. Are there any inquiries this evening? Just a couple of reminders from my end. Tomorrow night we have the EDC webcast, which is basically taking place in place of the annual EDC breakfast. So that'll be a live webcast that's airing at 5:30. My understanding is it will also be recorded though, so that people can access it and watch it after the fact if they can't make it live tomorrow. And then Wednesday, for all of us, Dufferin County is hosting an all council meeting at 7 o'clock on Zoom. And that is to receive the report from the consultants who have performed the service delivery review. Denise and I got a bit of a sneak peek last week, and I think they were going to do some additional fine tuning prior to Wednesday. But this basically will be the first opportunity for every councillor in Dufferin County to have a look at it. And then I think we're also looking at having the consultants come back and give our council a dedicated presentation some point in December, I believe. Denise?
Through the mayor, on December the 14th, the consultants will be presenting to Shelburne Council as well.
Okay, so it would be great if you can be there Wednesday night, but if not, they will be coming to see us on the 14th. Anything else for inquiries? Deputy Mayor Anderson?
Thank you. Sorry, thank you, Mayor Mills. This is for staff. First and foremost, I want to commend staff for ramping up the efforts when it comes to the promotion of the Grey Transit system. I've seen quite a bit on social media, and I think our spirits were all buoyed by the fact that we heard that our route is the most popular, but awareness needs to continue. So I just wanted to find out whether we're still on track with respect to getting the marketing materials out to the community. We talked about potentially utilizing the newspaper, the radio, and a mail drop. And my understanding is that this was going to be occurring sometime this month. So I just wanted to make sure that we're still on track for doing that.
Through the mayor, yes, we outlined all of the key dates in the last council meeting under the communications on what the strategy was, including a direct mail.
No, I appreciate that. What I'm asking is, are we still on track to have those timelines met? So I remember reading them. My question is, are we on time to make sure that we're delivering on or meeting those timelines?
Yes, we are.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay. Anything else? All right. So we'll move on to consideration of items. So the first is a report from our planner regarding a request for temporary relief from site plan agreement occupancy requirements for the new Tim Hortons restaurant located at 301 Colonel Phillips. So Steve, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. And I've asked the owners of this plaza to attend tonight as well, just in case there are any questions from council that I'm unable to answer. I will do my best, though, to answer any questions that you have. So I believe the owners are here under the name you'll see on your screen, Marina Masood. Tage and Ehab are the lead representatives for the ownership group. So you know where Summerhill Plaza is located, up at Highway 10 and Colonel Phillips Drive. It's under construction, and one of the key tenants there is the new Tim Hortons. One of the requirements of the site plan agreement for that development, going back to the agreement executed in May 2019, is to secure the Ministry of Transportation approvals and to complete the construction of the intersection signalization of Colonel Phillips Drive and Highway 10. And that intersection also involves third line in the township of Melancton. The process to secure those approvals is quite extensive. It did involve an environmental assessment, which took quite a bit of time, and then a design submission and review process with MTO that involves multiple rounds of engineering design drawings at various levels of detail. And the owners have now finalized those details with the MTO. And then finally, recently, the owners have entered into an agreement with the MTO to complete that process so that they now have all the permissions required and the security posted to complete that work on the highway. Some of that work does involve more than just signalization. So it involves reconfiguration of turning lanes and adding turning lanes, both at the intersection and into the site driveway. The only site entrance is off of Colonel Phillips Drive, which is the town's road, and the main entrance into the Summerhill development. The challenge that, of course, has resulted from all of this extended length of time and some of the delays related to COVID this year through the MTO review process has been that the site plan agreement requires the signalization and intersection work to be completed before any occupancy is granted in the plaza. The Tim Hortons is now at a point and has a tenant expecting to open perhaps before the end of the year, although the owners have updated me today that it's possible that Tim Hortons opening may be more into early to mid-January because of some further delays with respect to materials coming out of the US. So it's certainly been a challenging year to get things like construction and approvals through on the normal pace. And because of when the timing of the approvals came through with the MTO has required that the owner not do the signals this year, because obviously that would involve winter construction. So as soon as the weather allows in the spring, that's when that work will commence. But in the meantime, the owners are seeking relief from the site plan agreement requirement to allow the Tim Hortons to be opened as soon as it can. And that's less than an ideal situation, but we do appreciate, some of the causes of that delay and that the MTO requires those signalization to go in later. So obviously we asked a number of questions around that, and the key question was, does the MTO support that that approach? And MTO does support that. All of the provisions are in place to make sure that signalization occurs. One of the intents of that provision in the agreement was to make sure that obviously we have an ideal situation with the flow of traffic into and out of the plaza and into and out of the subdivision and the intersection as soon as that plaza starts to generate some traffic and receive some traffic. But from a strict engineering traffic perspective, the owner's consultants have demonstrated that in fact the Tim Hortons on its own does not warrant putting the signals in. So we have reviewed that with the town's engineers as well, and the key items under town control and interest are the entrance into the plaza off of Colonel Phillips Drive and the interim requirements on the site to handle. Obviously, as soon as that Tim Hortons is open, you're going to have traffic entering the site and using the drive-through and accessing the restaurant. So we've reviewed those items in the closest detail. And I've outlined in the report, I won't go through them all, the construction measures that have been identified in the submissions from the owner to control the traffic at the site entrance in Colonel Phillips Drive, along Colonel Phillips Drive to the intersection, and then of course at the intersection and along Highway 10. So from our perspective, the owner is doing everything it possibly can to make this as smooth as possible. Obviously, they may have to adapt as the Tim Hortons opens and construction begins in the spring to make sure that traffic is addressed in an organized and safe manner. One thing that may assist a little bit with the timing and managing the traffic is that traffic in general is a little bit lighter these days. I can't say for sure that will be the case into the middle of next year, but certainly with COVID, there is less general through traffic and traffic volumes in general. And then so the other item was just on the site itself. There are still 2 other buildings remaining to be completed on the site. The foundations are in for buildings A and B. These buildings will be completed as soon as they can be, but will not be open until the signalization is completed. So basically that sums up kind of the key items from our review. The request here again is just to allow the Tim Hortons to be opened as soon as it can be, which would be prior to the signalization of the intersection, with the understanding that that signalization will occur as soon as MTO allows it to be, which will be in the spring. We have consulted with the Township of Melancthon as well. The township didn't flag any concerns with that process. The only item they've identified, which we have identified with MTO previously, is that right now the plans don't show any changes to the posted speed limits through that intersection along Highway 10. We have previously inquired with MTO about that, but we're going to bring this up with them again. The MTO really identifies this posted speed limit based on the land uses on either side of the highway. And because one side of the highway will remain more rural in nature with the cemetery and farmland in Melancthon, it is unlikely that MTO is going to allow the posted speed limit to be dropped, but we'll reiterate the concern of both the township and the town that the posted speed approaching this intersection is a little on the high side coming around that bend. And then finally, the town engineer did review the interim plan on site. So the parking will be provided for the Tim Hortons. The parking areas and drive-through are now paved, and the spaces and the arrows directing traffic have all been lined. So the pavement markings are there, and the areas still under construction have been fenced off with construction fencing. So the owners have done a good job of making sure that the interim measures required on site while it's under construction are there to allow a safe opening of the Tim Hortons. So I think that covers the request, and it would simply be a resolution of council. We have identified 4 conditions, which basically have already been satisfied, but will require some ongoing monitoring as well to make sure it all goes smoothly. It doesn't require a formal change to the agreement because the other buildings will still be subject to that restriction of not being occupied until the signalization is completed. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions from council. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Are there any questions for Steve or Rena? Councillor Bernardo?
Steve, you know as well as I know that when Tim Hortons is open and there's a heck of a lot of truck traffic that goes north and south on that section of Highway 10. Parking. We've had issues on 124 with truck traffic parking when they go into Tim Hortons. There is no real area in the Tim Hortons or Colonel Phillips Drive for huge transport trucks to park. Has that been looked at?
It has been, and I know that's been discussed before, and that we want the highway at least signed as a minimum to identify that trucks are not allowed to park along the shoulders of the highway. Parts near the intersection will have curbs, so that will prevent that, but further north and south on the highway, I will follow up with MTO just to make sure that that's been considered in the design and that there'll be some signage posted. When I spoke with MTO staff about that previously, they were very receptive and willing to work with us on making sure that, you know, whatever measures can be implemented will be implemented. However, because of the profile of the road along certain sections north and south of the highway, there will still be gravel shoulders there. So really the best we can do, or the best that MTO has suggested that we could do is identify some signage saying no parking alongside the highway, and then it becomes an enforcement matter. until we get to a point where, you know, the road is more thoroughly upgraded north and south of the intersection to add curbs and prevent that physically from happening.
And my second question is regarding Colonel Phillips itself and the traffic in and out. I know that residents up there have complained a lot about their ability on certain days to get out of Colonel Phillips Drive because of the amount of traffic coming through from the north. Has that been addressed?
Yes, so with the signals, obviously, when those are in, that will, you know, control the traffic on the highway to allow that. But there's also turning lanes being added so that you'll have a dedicated left. And that will allow people to not have to queue behind the through traffic to go left. So, I mean, obviously in the interim, that's still going to be a bit challenging because of the speed and volume of traffic on Highway 10. There will, though, be reduced speeds and reduced lanes during construction. So overall, there'll be more control over the turning movements out of the subdivision with the flag persons there managing the traffic during construction and with the reduced construction zone speed limit. There's going to be a bit of a headache for a little bit until the signalization is done. But as I say, that is going to be done as early as it can be when the better weather arrives in the spring.
Those are my questions.
Okay.
Steve, I mean, obviously this original condition was imposed for a reason. You know, so I'm slightly uncomfortable with the fact of waiving it when it's a safety related, you know, justification. But I also don't want to hold the developers up and Tim Hortons up indefinitely when it, you know, the delays haven't been attributable to, you know, what they have done or haven't done. So I guess where I'm finding a bit of comfort is in the fact that MTO does not seem to be raising any serious objections to this. And I mean, you know, presumably they are the folks who should know best. You know, so I guess we can ultimately rely on their judgment and their expertise based on the studies they've done. Is that a fair comment, do you think?
Absolutely. That was our key criteria as well, is that, you know, if MTO has everything they need and has reviewed this from a traffic operations standpoint and they're satisfied, that that certainly addresses the big picture issue for us. And then the rest, as I say, Colonel Phillips Drive and the site conditions itself, those seem to be in good shape to manage it during construction. And you know, the owner has done what they can to try and both address everybody's requirements and the Tim Hortons commitments with respect to the opening. But it just got to a point where MTO said, you know, we can't try to put these signals and do this work now, because if we started and then it gets, you know, snow covered, it's going to be, you know, even less ideal than doing it a little bit later after the Tim Hortons opens. So I think this is the best, you know, course of action that we have, and to make sure that the Tim Hortons is still going to be a key tenant of this plaza.
Okay. And then the second question I have, just in terms of the 4 conditions that are contained in your recommendation, the first one speaks to a guarantee that the intersection and signalization work will be done in 2021. Is there any magic to that term guarantee? You know,
there is. It's a big dollar value that the owner has had to post as a security to the MTO for the cost of the intersection plus contingencies. So essentially the intersection's already been paid for. And so the dollar value is there, but it hasn't been built. So that secures that it will be built and in a timely way.
Okay. And that's how I was hoping you were going to answer that. So, okay. Any other questions for Steve, Deputy Mayor?
Thanks. Steve, my questions are pertaining to the rest of the plaza. And I believe you said, and if I'm mistaken, I know you'll correct me, that I guess the attempt is to try to complete that portion as quickly as possible. Is there a timeline or a projected timeline with respect to when that portion would be completed? And then the second question I have is, could you speak to any tenant activity that's happening with the plaza?
I don't have any specifics on tenants yet, but in speaking with the owners this afternoon, they did reiterate that the construction will continue on the other two buildings from now until after the signals are done, and that they anticipate having those buildings completed and ready for tenants in the first 6 to 8 months of next year. So they're going to continue on and have kind of secured that portion of the site so that those buildings can continue through the construction phase and be ready for tenants, midway through next year. I think there's a lot of market factors and impacts of COVID that may impact ultimately who occupies those leased spaces. But the important thing will be that they will be available, and assuming market conditions start to improve, hopefully sometime next year, I think there'll be some demand for those new spaces up there.
All right, any other questions? Okay, if not, can I get a mover and seconder for the motion that's contained in the agenda, essentially grants the relief to allow for occupancy based upon the 4 conditions that are contained? Moved by Councillor Buffett, seconded by Councillor Bernardo. Any further discussion on that? All in favor? It's carried. All right, thank you. Next up is another report from the planner dealing with the consent agreement for the residential lot severance located at 612 Owen Sound Street.
Yeah, so just to recap, this is a vacant lot on Owen Sound Street between existing homes, and back in February, a Committee of Adjustment granted a conditional severance. It's application number B2001, essentially just to take that existing lot and split it in 2, and that the owner is proposing a semi-detached dwelling, so 1 unit on each lot joined together in the middle. And the owner is now seeking to advance that to the construction phase and has submitted some plans and information for that, is in the process of clearing the conditions to register those lots. One of the conditions set out in that approval is that the owner enter into an agreement. This is the standard agreement that we require for all consents. It's basically a mini subdivision agreement that sets out all the obligations of the owner, to service the lots, grade the lots, and make sure that drainage is accommodated in a way in accordance with an approved grading and drainage plan. Ultimately, just to make sure that all of the requirements of the town are addressed in servicing and developing the 2 lots. So there's nothing really particularly unique about this consent agreement. It's very similar to what has been required for the previous agreements, but I'm happy to take any questions that you may have about this one specifically.
All right, are there any questions for Steve? No, if not, okay, so the motion reads, be it resolved, the council receives report P 2020-18 for information, and that leave be given for the reading and enacting of bylaw number 57-2020, being a bylaw to enter into a consent agreement with GP Carpentry Inc. for land located at 612 Owen Sound Street. A mover and seconder for that. Councillor Buffett, seconded by Councillor Hull. All in favor? Carried. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is that it, Steve, for you?
I am going to stick around for one other item and available to assist regarding the discussion about street names if needed.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So next we have a report from the treasurer regarding the tax rate bylaw schedule amendment. Carrie?
Hi, thank you, and through the mayor. So this is mostly just a housekeeping issue. When we passed our tax collection bylaw back in May, we did not know that we would be getting a new assessment for one of the industrial buildings out in the industrial subdivision for industrial new construction full. So it's a tax class called JT. So this is just an amending bylaw to adopt a new Schedule A so that we can bill for taxes on that property.
Any questions for Carrie? Okay. So the motion is, be it resolved, the council receives report FS 2020-11 with respect to amending the 2020 tax rate schedule, and that leave be given for the reading and enacting of bylaw number 58-2020, being a bylaw to amend Schedule A to bylaw number 25-2020. Mover and seconder, Councillor Fegan, seconded by Councillor Hall. All in favor? Carried. All right, Carrie again. The budget adoption bylaw.
Okay, so further to our public budget meeting, council passed a motion instructing staff to bring back the bylaw for the formal adoption of the 2021 budget. So this report just summarizes everything that we've done so far to get where we are tonight, and outlines the financial impacts, as well as I've attached the 2021 budget framework just so that it's an all-encompassing report. And the bylaw itself also speaks to the traditional cash-based budget, as well as the PSAB budget that we're required to pass in accordance with the Public Accounting Board. And I've also attached the water rates just for information, as well as council's strategic priorities, which the budget did touch on quite a few of those areas for 2021.
Yep. Okay. Any questions for Carrie? No. Okay, so the motion is, be it resolved, the council receives report FS 2020-12 with respect to the 2021 budget adoption, and that leave be given for the reading and enacting of bylaw number 56-2020, being a bylaw to adopt the estimates for the sums required during the year 2021 for general and water and sewer purposes of the corporation of the town of Shelburne. Who wants to put their name to the budget? Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Hall. All in favor? Carried. Thanks again, Carrie, for all of your work. This has to be one of the earliest budgets we've passed, I think, isn't it?
I think so, yes. For me, it is, yes.
Yeah, no, that's good.
And thank you to all of you as well. Oh, sorry.
Yep, you're up next.
I'm up again.
Carrie and Steve show tonight.
So this is another housekeeping issue with respect to the debenture debt for well 7. We, as council knows, we have done a water rate amendment in 2020, as well as the development charge amendment. And what has transpired from doing both of those is that we were able to capture the debt that we've paid for well 7 going back to 2016. And we're able to capture that by pulling those amounts out of the development charges, and going forward they will be funded through the development charges. And in the past we have paid for those debenture payments through the water rates. So this will help alleviate the money that we would normally spend on the debt can now be put towards the water reserves to help pay for the next set of projects that we have facing council for both for water. So it's kind of a housekeeping issue as well. And because it wasn't a budgeted item, I need council's approval to transfer those funds out of the development charges and to put them into our reserves.
Okay. Councilor Bernardo, is that a question? No, okay. Any questions for Carrie? No, okay. So the motion is, be it resolved, the council receives report FS 2020-13 with respect to the transfer from development charges for well 7 debenture debt payments, and that the treasurer be authorized to transfer $373,240.89 from development charges to cover the principal and interest payment from well 7 debenture debt for the years 2016 through 2020. And further, that the amount of $290,298.47, representing 2016 to 19, be placed in the Water Capital Reserve in the amount of $82,942.42, be used to offset the 2020 water budget. Mover and seconder. Councillor Buffett, seconded by Councillor Fegan. All in favor? Carried. All right, next, we need a resolution to apply for the MTO Connecting Links grant application. There's a brief sort of explanatory note contained right in the agenda. But I asked Jim before the meeting started if he had anything to add, and he said not really, unless there are any questions from council. Anybody unclear on what we're doing there? No? Okay. So the motion reads, be it resolved, the council authorizes the submission of a grant application to the Connecting Links Program 2021-22 for funding and support of the projects to resurface the Owen Sound Street and Highway 10 portions of the Connecting Link. And that if the application is successful, that the town of Shelburne will proceed with the timeline specified in the application, and that the town of Shelburne's portion of the funding for the resurfacing project be funded from the roads construction reserve. I'm going to mover and seconder for that one. Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Wagner. Let's hope we're 2 for 2 on this one. All in favor? Carried. All right, so next we have Councillor Wagner's notice of motion from last meeting. So it's moved by Councillor Wagner, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson. And it reads as follows: be it resolved that with the recent recommendations provided from the Anti-Black Racism and Discrimination Task Force and the guidelines associated with regards to timeline implementation and the current planning stage of the East End Fieldgate development, Council directs staff to work with the street naming policy and with Fieldgate to create inclusive street names, including but not limited to Dufferin County's Black and Indigenous community history. And furthermore, Council directs town staff to review the current street naming policy and report back to Council any recommendations required to ensure the policy meets the inclusive vision of both the Anti-Black Racism and Discrimination Task Force and Council's strategic plan. Councillor Wagner, would you like to speak to that one?
Yes, thank you very much. So basically, what it is that it's important to not only have the difficult conversation of racism, but to act on those conversations. This motion speaks to that. Although it is a small step, it is indeed a step forward. It would ensure that the town of Shelburne begins to honor and recognize the changing diversity in our town and would set an example for others to follow. With regards to the policy, it having specific verbiage would show action for now and the future.
Okay, great, thank you. Deputy Mayor Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor Mills. And I'm not sure whether there's going to be a slight amendment probably to this motion with respect to the street names, but I guess we'll get into that in a second. But first of all, I just want to commend Councillor Wagner for her commitment to transformative change and to moving beyond words and action. And I appreciate it, and I know that the community appreciates your efforts. You know, it's certainly self-explanatory and certainly in the spirit of what we've adopted as a group. As Councillor Wagner said, you know, the town of Shelburne, and I think we're all proud of this, has really taken a leadership role, not only obviously here, but certainly within the county itself, where others are looking at the efforts and are modeling their efforts after ours. And so this is reflective of that. And certainly I would hope that council see it fit to approve. But again, Mayor Mills, there may be, again, an amendment, if not with respect to the names.
Sure. Yeah, I can speak to that. So I had a chat with the deputy mayor very late in the afternoon today. You will have noticed that the deputy mayor has offered 3 notices of motion, which appear later in the agenda. The second of which, in my mind, sort of builds upon Councillor Wagner's motion that is before us right at the moment. Whereas Councillor Wagner's motion speaks to the fact that we should be looking at inclusive names when we're considering street names. Deputy Mayor's notice of motion goes a step further and suggests 4 different Indigenous related names. And I'll ask the Deputy Mayor a question here in a second. But one of the challenges that we're dealing with, Fieldgate wants to get moving ahead with some of their marketing, and the planner can maybe speak to this a little bit further as well. But I think the plan is that our planner is going to bring a report at the December 14th meeting with a list of Fieldgate's proposed street names for council's consideration and approval. And in order to get the 4 names that the Deputy Mayor is suggesting in time for that report to appear on our December 14th agenda, my thought was that we either through friendly amendment or just through general direction to staff, include that the 4 names contained in the Deputy Mayor's notice of motion be forwarded to Fieldgate as part of those discussions. So it's probably a complicated way of explaining what I'm trying to get to, but essentially what we're doing is just saying that the 4 names that the Deputy Mayor is suggesting, we'll tack those onto Councillor Wagner's motion so that those can be provided to Fieldgate in enough time for them to move on and get their report through Steve onto the agenda for our next meeting.
And if I just add to that with respect to the names, I think it's fair to say this. I don't think it'll be an issue, but Fieldgate is supportive of especially when it comes to the street signs representing the Indigenous history. It was their intent to actually move forward and submit those names, but because of timelines, they weren't able to meet that. So again, they're fully supportive of the names. They wanted an opportunity to engage the Dufferin Resource Circle with respect to these names, but didn't have the time to do that. Subsequent my conversation with the representative at Fieldgate, I've had that discussion with that organization. They are supportive of the use of the names themselves. And so that's the reason, in the spirit of Councillor Wagner's motion, that it just made sense to put that on the table, recognizing Fieldgate's intentions and certainly ours in recognizing that history.
Okay, Steve Weaver, did you want to comment any more just on the process?
Yeah, so we did have a street name plan submitted for circulation by Fieldgate, and it's the second iteration. Fieldgate certainly is supportive, as the Deputy Mayor outlined, and their first iteration of the street naming plan encompassed a number of Indigenous names, group names, and not all of the ones in the notice of motion, but one of those. And I'm not sure if they had considered the other 3, but what came of that is through the circulation or initial review of that, we just asked that they confirm that these particular Indigenous groups, in fact, support having their name, the name of their group, attached to a street name in this development and generally in Shelburne. And there was some difficulty for the owner, Fieldgate, to actually affirm that. They weren't getting responses to some of those inquiries. And as I say, it maybe didn't reach out to the right people or wasn't channeled the right way. So we can certainly help and assist with that outreach again. But I think that's still important to make sure that we don't attach names to future streets without having some consent and acknowledgement of the group that we're naming the streets after. So as a result of some of those delays of making that attempt, they did submit a second iteration of their street naming plan, which takes a different tact, and that tact is to name the streets of the subdivision after the natural heritage features found in the adjoining wooded area. That has not been, formally circulated, and we have not provided them with comments back on that. But that's the plan that has been referenced by you, Mr. Mayor, as the one that we had advised them we could potentially bring back to council for consideration on December 14th. And the reason for a bit of the push on the timing is, as you say, they've commenced their marketing process. So they do want to be able to show the approved street names once they are approved on the plan that's out there for purchasers to look at. But in the meantime, I've advised them just to keep with the general naming of street A and B and C and so forth until we have a council approved street naming plan. So I just wanted to raise all that. It's not that we couldn't include or ask these groups to have some of these names included in the final plan. It's just that it may be a bit challenging from a timing perspective.
So just as a final comment to what Steve just said, the names that were proposed, and I think Steve quickly outlined sort of the difficulties and the challenges based on confirming whether the names that were proposed originally or the ones that were submitted. And so the organization that I believe the Fieldgate rep was trying to reach out to and then maybe didn't have the time or they weren't responsive enough considering the timelines. As I mentioned, I've had the opportunity to now reach out to that group, and they have affirmed those names for use for the street names. So the consent has been provided. I would agree under no circumstances would we want to propose and use names where we haven't touched the right folks or gotten the permission from the right folks, but that permission has been granted. So that's the reason why I think it's now appropriate with those names and with the intention originally to add it to Councillor Wagner's motion.
So Steve Weaver, just for clarification, there's nothing to preclude us from submitting some other suggestions for them to consider at this point?
No, not at all. In fact, I kind of was holding off on giving some feedback to make sure that we had some of this discussion before we gave them further direction on street naming expectations. And that's certainly good to hear that the group's identified, there's been some acknowledgement there, and they support having these names put on the list. And then certainly if there's follow-up with those groups, we could provide a proposed plan working with Fieldgate of where those names or whether it's all or some of them are proposed within the subdivision, specifically which streets, and ask for feedback.
Okay. And just a question for the clerk in terms of process. Are we better to include these names by way of friendly amendment, assuming Councillor Wagner and Deputy Mayor Anderson are okay with that, or should we just sort of offer that as general direction through to Steve?
I would recommend including those names in the resolution.
Okay. So Councillor Wagner, are you okay to include the 4 names, Potawatomi, Chippewa, Ojibwe, and Anishinaabe?
Yes, 100%.
Okay. And Deputy Mayor Anderson, I'm assuming you're okay with that? All right. Okay. Any additional discussion on Councillor Wagner's motion as amended? Okay, I'll call the question then. All in favor? It's carried. Okay. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
See you tomorrow. Okay, so next is consideration of a short-term business license for Smoky Island Grill, Inc. That application is included in the agenda package. Jennifer, do you want to speak to that at all?
Thank you, Your Worship. The applicants have complied with all of their submission requirements to obtain permission to operate their business. I apologize, unfortunately, I wasn't able to provide you with all of the background information as it contains personal information and is protected under MFIPA. But I can assure you they have complied with the short-term business license requirements, and we are recommending approval of the license.
Okay. Any questions on that? Sorry, Councillor Wagner.
Just wondering the duration of short-term. Is there a reason why it's not long-term, or is it just because they're sort of only going to be operating for a certain amount of time? I know we're going into winter and food truck might be tricky to operate in the middle of the winter, which I'm, wondering about, but I am super excited for it. So just wondering why only temporary or short-term, short-term.
Through your worship, it's not a regular business license application because it's not a bricks and mortar location. It's a mobile location, meaning they can move the vehicle as they wish to other locations. So that's the short-term business license. It doesn't mean it's open short-term. They can have, similar to the businesses in the downtown core or to No Frills, they can set their own days and their own hours. It simply is recognizing the fact that it's not a permanent location and it is a mobile unit.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, can I get a mover and seconder then to authorize the issuance of the short-term license? Councillor Wagner, seconded by Councillor Fegan. Sorry, didn't see your hand. All in favor? Carried. All right, so then, as I mentioned, the deputy mayor had provided 3 notices of motion, which we will consider on December 14th. I'm assuming we can scratch number 2. Okay, so because they were provided in advance and they're actually in the agenda, I won't bother reading them into the record because they're already there, and we'll consider those at the next meeting. On to communications. There are 13 items listed in the agenda this evening. Is there anything that anybody would like to deal with independently? Councillor Bernardo.
Item number 7,
Okay.
the NBCA media release.
Okay.
There's a part of that release speaks to the Bill 229 and to protect, support, and recover from COVID-19 acts, and it speaks to Schedule 6, which is on the conservation authorities. In the changes to Bill that Bill 229 has done is it's changed the number of parts of the roles of the Conservation Authority on regulating development, permit appeal process, and the review and appeal of the Planning Act. And they are stepping in as a province. They can overstep anything that the Conservation Authority is trying to do, which they were set up in 1954 after Hurricane Hazel to make sure that they protected so that there was no development in areas where there was possible loss of life or damage to property. The province has now decided that they are going to overstep anything the Conservation Authority does. The Conservation Authority under this act can no longer appeal to local planning appeals tribunal. They're not allowed to engage in that. And the problem that the Conservation Authority has is that they're going to be making decisions without any of the expertise and data that the Conservation Authority actually does with their expertise. And the other parts to that is that they can, the minister can now suggest what standards and requirements for non-mandatory programs are negotiated between the authority and the municipalities, whereas before we used to do that ourselves with the Conservation Authority directly and not have the minister tell us what we can and what programs we should have or not have. They also have the authority to put who they feel should represent us on the Conservation Authority. So we may no longer have the ability to select our own representatives on that. So I've got a motion prepared that I'd like to read out, and I don't know if I can get a mover and a seconder for it, because I feel that this is important, that we shouldn't have the province stepping in over top of the municipalities and deciding for us things that we have been working on and doing quite well with our Conservation Authority for quite a while. We are the ones that paid for the Conservation Authority. The province gives no money at all to them. And yet they are basically, for whatever reason, deciding that they're the ones that should have the ability to do overstep the municipalities in regards to certain items.
Okay, so you said you have a motion prepared?
Yeah, and I tried to send it to Jennifer, and I'm not sure if she got it or not ahead of time, but if she's not, I'll send it afterwards. It's a lengthy motion. So if you don't, have you got it, Jennifer? She said, I think she was shaking her head yes.
Looks like it.
I don't know. Do you want me to read it out, Your Worship?
Yeah, sure. And Jennifer, I mean, because this relates to an agenda item, we can do this without notice, right?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, so go ahead, Councillor Bernardo.
Okay. Whereas the province has introduced Bill 229, Protect, Support, and Recover from COVID-19 Act, Schedule 6, Conservation Authority Act. And whereas the legislation introduces a number of changes in new sections that could remove or significantly hinder the Conservation Authority role in regulating development, permit appeal process, and engaging in review and appeal of planning applications. And whereas we rely on watershed expertise provided by local conservation authority to protect residents' property and local natural resources on a watershed basis by regulating development and engaging in reviews of applications submitted under the Planning Act. And whereas the changes allow the minister to make decisions without conservation authority watershed data and expertise, and whereas the legislation suggests the minister will have the ability to establish standards and requirements for non-mandatory programs which are negotiated between conservation authorities and municipalities to meet local watershed needs. And whereas municipalities believe the appointment of municipal representatives on the Conservation Authority Board should be a municipal decision, and the chair and vice chair of the Conservation Authority should be duly elected. And whereas the changes to the duty of the members contradicts the fiduciary duty of the Conservation Authority Board member to represent the best interests of the Conservation Authority and its responsibilities to the watershed. And whereas conservation authorities have already worked with the province development sector and municipalities to streamline and speed up permitting and planning approvals through the Conservation Authority, client service and streamlining initiatives. And whereas changes to the legislation will create more red tape and cost for the conservation authorities and their municipal partners and potentially result in delays in development approval process. And whereas municipalities value and rely on natural habitats and water resources within our jurisdiction for health and well-being of residents, municipalities value conservation authorities' work to prevent and to manage the impact of flooding and other natural hazards, and municipalities value the conservation authorities' work to ensure safe drinking water. Now, therefore, it be resolved that the province of Ontario repeal Section 6 of the Budget Measures Act, Bill 229, that the province continues to work with conservation authorities to find workable solutions to reduce red tape and create conditions for growth, that the province respects the current conservation authority and municipal relationships, and that the province embrace their long-standing partnerships with conservation authorities and provide them with the tools and financial resources they need to effectively implement their watershed management program. Should be program wiped out on the thing.
Okay. All right. Is there a seconder for Councillor Bernardo's motion? Councillor Fegan. Okay. Is there any additional conversation or debate on that? In favor?
Oh, one other item, if I can add, I would like to have that sent out to all the other municipalities as well as the province. Sorry, I didn't add that to my motion.
Okay. All in favor? Carried. All right. Anything else in the list of correspondence? Okay, if not, can I get a motion to receive those items that are listed? Councillor Wagner, seconded by Councillor Bernardo. All in favor? Carried. All right, can I get a mover and seconder for the confirming bylaw? Councillor Hall, seconded by Councillor Buffett. All in favor? Carried. And a motion to adjourn in record time, I think. Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Wagner. All in favor? Carried. All right. Thank you all. We'll see some of you, I'm assuming, on Wednesday night for the all council meeting. And if not,
I'll be there.
we'll see you
Yeah.
soon.
I got the agenda. Wait, did not everybody get